We are just a few days away from the Chicago Bears taking the field in the Hall of Fame game, their first preseason game. We still don't know how much or if Caleb Williams is going to play or not, but on today's episode, we'll look at the three position groups that could need the most work still, and as we go through these preseason games, but more importantly, we'll look at the overall takeaways from the days in training camp that we've had so far. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And so I want to start off with the positive, the takeaways. What has happened so far through the almost 2 weeks that the Chicago Bears have been in training camp? Of course, last week was the first full week, but it's been almost 2 weeks so far that we've been into this. And one thing has remained true throughout most of this, especially once the pads are on. The Chicago Bears defense is well, far, and above the offense. And that's not as bad of a thing as what, some people are making it out to be, is what it could be. There are some concerns, and we'll get into those concerns so far. But through the 2 padded practices, the five non-padded practices, listen, the offense, while has had its positives, has had its days, has had its, drills where they're just 2-minute drills, the 11-on-11. It's had its time where it's looked really good, but the defense is far and above right now, above the offense. And that's, like I said, that's not concerning. This is a defense that many people are expecting to be top 10, but they have the expectations of being a top 5 defense in this season. And so because of that, you won it. This is a new offensive unit with a new offensive coordinator and a rookie quarterback, a rookie wide receiver on top of that, an offensive line that has dealt with some injuries. This defense better well be above the offense right now, but it's been made true. And the defensive line is making a statement so far through these practices, especially the padded practices. And so when you have that paired with what we're seeing so far, getting consistent pressure on Caleb Williams, we talked about it in yesterday's live stream. I know that it's concerning, especially with the history that we've seen from the Chicago Bears offensive line over the last 2-3 years, if not more, right? I often quote the 106 sacks that we gave up in the last 2 seasons. Those things, so anytime you hear of the offensive line being beat, it brings those concerns. But the offensive line has had its own injury issues. Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, who's back out in injury as well, things like that. A new center play, all that type of thing. But this defensive line has been absolutely legit and led by, in a lot of ways, of course, Montez Sweat, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody considering how much better this team played after we acquired Montez Sweat last year. But then also the young guy in Javon Dexter, who we heard so early on is, it came in with his body transformed, things like that. But his ability to get to the quarterback and just being a bruiser on that offensive line has seemingly been really, really good so far. So the defense being ahead of the offense, we have one of the better, if not the best secondary in the game of football as well. And we already have seen what that linebacker crew is able to do. We got tackling machines all throughout that linebacker crew. So the defense being ahead is something that we want to hear right now. We got people who can make plays on defense. And so, that's not something that should be too surprising right now, but that is one of the big takeaways so far. But even with the offense and the issues that it's had in the defense shining, one thing that has been maintained by just about everybody who's gone to practices so far is that Caleb Williams has been really good. The way that he moves around the pocket, the way that his presence in the pocket overall, his understanding of the defense, picking up, understanding that, leading the huddle, all those things have continued to be really good for Caleb Williams as well. And yes, it's just practice so far, right? But he's even escaping the pocket to make some really good throws still down the field rather than just looking at making something with his leg or panicking, right? So like I've said before, it's about the process, not necessarily just the result when you're going through training camp, but the process that it looks like Caleb Williams is going through has been really good so far. Even being a leader so far as to, DeMarcus Walker and Gerald Everett getting into a bit of an altercation and Caleb Williams being the one that steps into that as well. So Caleb is growing as a leader, and that's been evident through every mini camp and everything that the Bears have had so far. And I think it seems like he's earning the respect of that locker room, and that is the most important thing right now. Once the pads are on and he's on the field, we'll see the other aspects and the things that we need to see in the game. But leading the huddle, being a leader for the team, setting the tone and example, learning your playbook. Caleb Williams right now is doing that. Ryan Bates so far saying this. The jump from OTAs to now, that's just been a huge step forward for him. Being vocal, doing a great job with his cadence, getting everybody on the same page, the play calls, because it's a lot different than what he was doing in college, and he's embracing it wholeheartedly, and he's kicking ass. He really is. That comes from potential starting center in Ryan Bates, which we'll see with that one. But when you just look at and see these things, a couple of things you always notice from Caleb Williams, he keeps his eyes downfield. He understands where pressure is coming from. He has a really good, unique feel for that game. And when he does get out the pocket, he's still looking to make throws, and he's made some touchdown throws coming out the pocket. We haven't really heard a whole lot of his creativity with his feet yet. But again, as I've said for months now, that's not the thing that we're necessarily looking for Caleb Williams to do. The thing that we're looking from him the most is the quarterbacking aspect of it. And he seems to be really thriving in that role in doing those things. So Caleb Williams and his growth so far is definitely a big positive for the Chicago Bears as well through this training camp. And it's been one of the things that we've consistently heard about through training camp is how good Caleb Williams has been at the aspects of being a quarterback that he can display so far. We just got to see if it's going to keep holding true once football games start getting played because, again, we're Chicago Bears fans and we've been through some shit. So that's just to put it frank. But with that said, we do still have concerns on the offense, and this isn't necessarily about Caleb Williams. It's more so about the offensive line, which I alluded to, right? We have a really good defensive line. We got Montez Sweat. You got Javon Dexter playing at a high level. But the offensive line, through anything, even if you're not necessarily concerned about the pressure that they're allowing on the quarterback because it is only training camp, it's still the health concerns, right? Same old culprits as well. Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, Braxton Jones, right? So getting injury concerns already, yes, it's training camp, and it may be the thing where, yeah, you sit a day or so in training camp. It's only training camp. That could absolutely be an aspect of it. But when you look at it, Braxton Jones came in with some big concerns about how he's going to develop and things like that. He's been ramping up, but still is battling injury on top of everything. Those things are there. But there are some positive signs as well. That Caleb Williams has really good chemistry with either Sitter and Ryan Bates or Coleman Shelton. That's what it heard. That's what it's been reported so far. So that's really good. Matt Eberflus has said that the team would take the center competition seriously, and it seems to be doing that. They're rotating day in and day out of who's getting those starting reps at the center position. So they're trying to find that right balance as well. So we're holding out to that. But health concerns to Nate Davis. He was sidelined on Saturday. He had a strain. He's listed as day-to-day. Again, we know with Nate Davis, we need Nate Davis to be on that football field to see what we're going to have in him, considering he has that guaranteed deal. So that's something that's a little bit of a concern there. But listen, Ryan Poles picked up depth pieces for the offensive line, which that's not really the question, right? We know that they've picked up depth pieces, but it's you got to get your starters right. So there's a little bit of that. Matt Eberflus talked about it as well, saying this. Availability is everything in this league. You've got to be available to practice, and you go to be available to go through hard times in terms of doing hard better during training camp. That's a weird way to phrase that there, Matt Eberflus. I'm reading the quote direct. I thought I misread it. That's our part of preparing for the first part of the season, being able to do that, to callous yourself. That's your individual responsibility to the football team. And when you're not out there, guess what? That doesn't happen. And that's really what it comes down to. We had an offensive line last year that didn't really have much time playing together to build up that continuity. The hope, of course, is that would not be the case this season for the Chicago Bears. And unfortunately, it has been so far for the Bears. And so, of course, we have a hope. We have those concerns. There are more than a reason to have them. But hopefully, this is just the Bears going through these growing pains together right now. But eventually the offensive line gets it together. And then maybe it's not as big of a concern. But, that is the one thing in this that, like I've said, as much talent as this Chicago Bears team has on the offensive side of the ball at the skill positions, if you don't have an offensive line that can stand up and run block, pass block, and be solid for you, it brings a lot of concern. So, yeah, hearing that the Bears offensive line still has been a concern, it's going to be triggering for Bears fans. But let's wait and see, right? Like I said, this is only training camp right now. Let's wait and see. But you do want to set the expectations and set your rotations and things in training camp. And so when you have guys that are still in and out of the lineup as consistently as what we've had, it's going to be a concern. So let's see what comes out on the other side of that. But something else that I want to talk about, I meant to talk about this following up on this after the Caleb Williams talk, is Tyler Scott actually being somebody that we keep hearing being talked about in training camp is huge to me. Not only because of Tyler Scott being somebody that we drafted going into his second year, but also because of the future. Like I he's not going to get a whole lot of opportunities theoretically with this team being the fourth wide receiver, but to hear that he does have that chemistry with Caleb, I've labeled it out for Tyler Scott a couple of times, right? Do the most with the opportunities that you have, and building that chemistry with your QB1 can definitely help you take advantage of those opportunities more. So really good to hear that Tyler Scott's been in a really good rhythm and groove as well. Haven't heard anything negative about the running back so far. It really sounds like everybody in the running back room is doing pretty solid as well. So those things are going in the right direction for the Chicago Bears also. But while we went through the first set of practices, basically with only one penalty on that offense, pre-snap penalty, it seemed like, especially since the pads have come off, that there have been, as labeled as, operational issues with the offense, right? Eberflus saying this after a struggle after Saturday's practice, saying this, the offense obviously had its struggles today. But I said to them, all three phases have to play well for us to be a good football team. It's got to be all three phases, and we're just not there yet. I do expect us to learn and to grow from this. So it seems like, things are since the pads have been on, have really changed for it. Is that they've had a bunch of pre-snap penalties over the last couple of the two padded practices. That the offensive line on Friday alone had 5 false starts. Now, again, we know that we got some injured players, so not everybody who's going to be part of that rotation has been able to be in there. But 5 false starts on one day of practice is a bit concerning. And Saturday got worse than got better when you had 7 pre-snap penalties throughout Saturday's practice. So those things are there. 5 false starts, 2 delay of games on Saturday's practice. It really is right now. It seems like this offense, with the pads on and a little bit more pressure, some of those leaky parts are kind of rearing their ugly head a little bit more consistently. So it's up to Shane Waldron, it's up to Caleb Williams, it's up to the players to get that all on the right page. And let's hope that they can do that. Like that's what training camp is for, though, right? Training camp is to fix it. Not everything is going to be a well-oiled machine. Hell, even maybe by the start of the season. But training camp is to get some of those things on the same page. Work on some of the things that you've had there that have looked a little creaky, right? And to get that together. And that's what hopefully the offense is going to do. But I, for one, feel really good about hearing that the defense is where it is, right? We do want to have a top 5 defense. I think we have a playoff caliber defense, one that could really get the Chicago Bears to maybe get into close to the playoffs just by the nature of how good this defense can be. But we need the offense to pick up their part of the job also. So, you're gonna do that and get that together. And let's hope that this is what happens through training camp, right? Now, Matt Eberflus talked about all 3 phases of the game, so we got to talk about all 3 phases of the game. Right now, the punt returning job is still wide open on the Chicago Bears. So Richard Hightower, who is the special teams coordinator, mentioned that the candidates to return punts are Rome Odunze, DeAndre Carter, Dante Pettis, Velus Jones Jr., Greg Stroman Jr., Tyreek Stevenson. He even mentioned potentially DJ Moore. I think he's just talking a little bit on that. I believe that when I see it. But it seems like the punt returning job has not been solved as of yet. So look for them to try a lot of different players there throughout that first preseason game as well. They're returning punts. So, and hopefully the opposing team is kicking a lot of punts because that's how good the defense shows up. But, so those things are, a big positive. And, we'll see who ends up winning that punt returning job. I didn't see Ian Willer's name mentioned in that. That he may still be a dark horse candidate, but, we'll see what comes of that. But through these takeaways from training camp, what are kind of some of the biggest questions for this team now, still in training camp, to kind of try to figure out? The question still is who's going to be that opposite edge rusher? We've heard some positive things as far as Jacob Martin looking really good so far in training camp. We even heard through Saturday's practice with the pads on, Austin Booker has looked extremely well in Saturday's practice. So we'll see over this week how he builds upon that and maybe creates a little bit of separation for himself. And of course, DeMarcus Walker is going to be the guy there as well. But it seems like that defensive end position right now still has not been locked in yet. And so, with Austin Booker being there, Jacob Martin being a veteran there, DeMarcus Walker's also a veteran, it still left some questions on, will the Bears go out and get a veteran defensive end to come add to this team? I really think they're trying to do all due diligence to see who shows up before they go out and spend that money on that position, especially with Javon Dexter looking as good as what he is, because that 3 tech is so important to Matt Eberflus's coaching scheme. But so far, that is one of the bigger questions here. And so, and let's be clear. Both Yannick Ngakoue, Rasheem Green, kind of the people that we had there in these spots last year contending for that starting spot, neither one of them had really great seasons, right? So, and that's not to say that you can just you can settle for not having a good season. You want to put your team in the best situation possible, but I just think that it's a little bit, if Javon Dexter and what we're hearing from him is as legit as what it sounds, that it's just you could take a little bit of a risk allowing these guys, and maybe even going into the season with Walker, Booker, and Martin kind of seeing who kind of maybe separates themselves during the start of the season there. But that is something that's really been evident there as well so far for the Chicago Bears, is that edge position. That's still a big question that they're trying to figure out who's going to be that opposite edge on the other side of that defensive line for Montez Sweat. So that's one thing so far. As well as the interior defensive line, seems like the Bears are really confident with going younger. Javon Dexter, what he showed, so far in training camp has people really, really excited, and they're setting up for hoping that Javon Dexter can have a really big season for the Chicago Bears. And I hope that ends up being the case. But then when you look at behind him, you got Zach Pickens there, who was drafted the same year. He's a second-year player as well. But overall, it seems like he's been having a solid offseason as well there for you. So, the Bears, the question is that is that the right move for the Bears, is to rely that much on that youth in that interior defensive line? We've heard that Austin Booker, Dominique Robinson have also lined up on the interior. And we know that we have DeMarcus Walker also, who can be on the edge or in the interior as well. So, yeah, while, relying on that youth seems like the move right now as well, but Eric Washington has a lot of different looks that he's going to do on that defensive line. But it's good to hear so far that Javon Dexter is being exactly what you want him to be, a second-round pick in year 2. You want him, if you project him to be a starter, this is where you want him to grab the reins. And it seems like he's doing that adamantly in practice, and that he's really leaving no question to really ask. He is that 3-tech for the Chicago Bears. Now we just got to see that depth behind him overall on that interior defensive line as well, how that works out. But Eric Washington is going to get weird. And by that, I mean that in a good way. You are going to see some lineups in that, and maybe it is an Austin Booker lining up inside. Maybe it is a Dominique Robinson lining up inside. You're going to see some weird shit here in these 3 preseason games. Make no mistake about that as well. And then one of the biggest questions, and I alluded to it a little bit in the first segment, it just comes down to do the Bears have enough on the offensive line? That is a huge question here, is that, is it enough on that offensive line? And that means are you prepared to weather an injury or two, right? And what does this offensive line look like going into the regular season? Concerns aside about how good the defensive line has looked in practice or not, like I said, the bigger thing that sticks out to me is that we're having injury concerns yet again. Now, we've added some really good depth. Matt Pryor, Jake Curran, Ryan Bates, Coleman Shelton. Can Kieran Amagaje give you something over the course of this season, right? Because he's had some injury concerns as well. But when you have time, or Tevin Jenkins missing maybe a bunch of time potentially, which again, what he has right now, they're not saying he's going to miss a bunch of times, but there's always that concern with Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis of how much are they going to miss, and if they do, how well can this offensive line still perform without those guys? Darnell Wright is going to go through, right? We heard that, Jacob Martin, Montez Sweat, they've both been lining up with him and taking him to battle sometimes and things like that. And that's going to happen. And I'm not really too worried about Darnell Wright in the second year. I think he's going to be really good overall. But, hopefully I hope that what this offensive line is going through with their own defensive line just sets them up to be in a really great place when the season starts, because you could be going up against a defense. If that defense does end up being top 5, you've gotten an iron sharpen iron yourself throughout most of this offseason. So let's hope that that's the case. But those are some of the bigger questions as well at it. Like, I got some rotation, like who's going to be the running back 2 is still another big question for this Bears team as well. We don't know yet. We don't know for sure who's going to be the running back 2. Now, we've heard really good things about Khalil Herbert, and for all the questions around him and things that have been mentioned by people, I hope that Khalil Herbert I hope that everybody has a big season. I'm not wishing against anybody, and I hope that nobody does either. So overall, though, it's been really good. And one thing positive as well is that it seems like Shane Waldron, the offense and the players that were on this team last year, and seeing the difference from last year to this year, it's also been noticeable for this team. And so, those are things that go in the right direction. You revamp your offensive coaching staff, you want to make sure that everybody feels like it's the right direction. And it seems like that's been definitely the thing so far. So we'll see what's going to happen overall with this team, man. I'm really excited. We're days away from getting Chicago Bears football. Nobody does it like Bears Central on game day, so make sure you guys stay tuned in for that. We'll be back to doing pregame shows, live calls from C-Dub, live post-game shows as well on the channels on game day, so make sure you guys stay tuned in for that. But that's my time for today, y'all. Make sure you guys are following the show at Chi Bears Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. ChicagoBearsCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related, but that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, Chi-Town up, but bear down, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.